I always thought it was normal to come second. Not in the way that left bruises or raised voices. No, it was quieter than that. It was in the little things. The moments no one else noticed, but I could never quite forget. Being the older sister came with rules, and those rules were made clear before I was old enough to even question them. My parents never sat me down to explain, but somehow it was always understood. The older child gives way. The older child understands. The older child sacrifices. I was told that Emily was still learning, that she was sensitive, that she didn't handle things well, that I needed to set an example. So I did. I gave her my seat at the table when she pouted, let her unwrap the last present on Christmas morning, stepped aside when she wanted the same toy I was already holding. My room became our room. My things became shared things. And when I cried, it was always met with a calm reminder. You're the big sister, honey. She looks up to you. Be the grown-up. I learned to swallow disappointment like it was water, not because I didn't feel it, but because I genuinely believed that was love. To give and give and give until someone else was full, even if I left the table hungry. It didn't feel cruel. That's the part that's hard to explain. My parents weren't mean. They weren't villains. They didn't lock me in closets or forget my birthday. They just didn't really see me, not the way they saw Emily. With her, their eyes sparkled. With me, they nodded, satisfied, like I was a to-do list item they'd already checked off. As I got older, the pattern held. Emily needed more, so I took less. Emily was going through something, so I waited quietly. I never complained. I never asked for fairness. I didn't even think I deserved it. That belief lived deep in my bones. The kind of lesson you don't question, because it's been repeated so many times it sounds like truth. And then I met David. He was the first person in my life who didn't make me feel like loving me was a favor. We met at a friend's barbecue. He was wearing this dumb shirt with a pun on it, something about avocados, and I remember thinking, God, he's not even trying. But he asked me about my favorite books instead of what I did for work, and he laughed at all the wrong moments in a way that felt refreshing, like he wasn't performing for anyone. We started talking, then texting, then dating, and slowly, something began to shift in me. David made space for me in a way no one else ever had. He remembered the stories I told offhandedly, the songs I hummed under my breath, the way I twisted my ring when I was nervous. He saw me, and more than that, he prioritized me. It was unnerving at first, honestly. I didn't know what to do with that kind of attention. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop for him to grow tired of it. But he didn't. When I told him about the way things had always been in my family, about Emily, about the small quiet hurts I carried, he didn't tell me to get over it. He just held my hand and said, You didn't imagine it. You just learned to live with it. 4 years later, we were still together, sharing a cluttered apartment with bad plumbing and too many houseplants. We argued about dishes and Netflix queues and which side of the bed the dog got to sleep on. And then, one night, after a long day and a burned dinner, David pulled out a ring from his hoodie pocket, looked me dead in the eye, and said, You've always put everyone else first. I want to spend the rest of my life putting you first. I said yes. Through tears, through laughter, through disbelief. I said yes. Then I called my parents. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a little surprise, maybe some excitement, maybe even a few questions about the proposal. But mostly I expected them to be happy for me, to celebrate me. I thought, this is the moment where I'm finally the one who matters. When my mom answered, I barely gave her time to say hello before blurting it out. David proposed, I said, breathless. We're getting married. There was a pause. Not a joyful kind. The kind that makes your stomach twist. Then she said flatly, Oh, that's fast. Do you two even have money for a wedding? It wasn't the words themselves that hurt. It was the fact that I hadn't asked for anything. I hadn't said a word about needing help, about planning, about money. Just wanted to share good news. But before I could even get to the part where I told her we were keeping it small, she was already telling me what they couldn't do. We just want to be up front with you, she said. Things are tight right now. Don't expect much from us. And just like that, the air changed. I forced a laugh. It's fine, I said too quickly. We're planning something simple anyway. Backyard, small guest list, cozy. I could hear her smile over the phone. Not the warm kind, but the polite kind. Well, that's good, she said. No need to make a fuss. Those big weddings are such a waste of money. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it, and swallowed the rest of what I wanted to say. How I imagined her helping me pick a dress, how I thought my dad might walk me down the aisle, how I'd hoped they'd want to be involved. But once they knew I didn't expect financial help, their tone shifted. Suddenly they were excited, asking about the date, the colors, saying they'd try to make it. I told myself that was enough, that it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I tried to involve them gently. I sent flower samples, asked their thoughts on music, tried to schedule a visit to the venue. Each time I was met with a shrug or a dismissive suggestion to keep it minimal. Eventually, my mom said, "Just give us the cash and we'll help take care of decorations. It'll save you time." I wanted to believe this was her trying, that maybe she just didn't know how to show up the way I wanted her to. So I handed over the money. Not much, just a few thousand we'd saved, and focused on other parts of the wedding. Between work and life and last-minute errands, I didn't have time to micromanage. I told myself to trust them. The week before the wedding, I started to get this tight feeling in my chest, the kind you get when you're waiting for something to go wrong, but I pushed it down. It wasn't until 2 days before the ceremony when I walked into the venue that the unease fully settled into my bones. The place looked empty. Not unclean, just unfinished. A sad arch stood lopsided at the altar, draped with a single strip of tulle. There were folding chairs, mismatched and bare. No flowers, no lighting, no aisle runner. It felt like a rush backyard birthday party, not a wedding. I turned to my mom, heart in my throat. "Where's everything? The decorations, the setup? Where's the rest of what we planned?" She looked at me with a tight expression, then glanced at her phone like I was keeping her from something more important. "Well, Emily needed help with something. There was this designer bag she really wanted. She was short by a few hundred, so we just gave her a little from the wedding budget." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "You gave away my wedding money for a purse?" She blinked at me like I was being irrational. "She's your sister. It's just a bag. You know how much she loves that brand. What's the big deal?" I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to tell me this was a joke. But no one did. "The big deal," I said, barely holding back tears, "is that this is my wedding. My only wedding. And you used what little I trusted you with to buy a bag for Emily?" She crossed her arms. "She hardly ever asks for anything. And you've always shared with her before. Why are you making such a big fuss now?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how many more pieces of myself I had to give away before they finally saw me. Instead, I turned away. Silent, hollow. Some part of me still wanted to believe this could be fixed. That maybe if I said the right thing, they'd realize what they'd done. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I wasn't the daughter you make space for. I was the daughter you forget. Until you need something. The morning of the wedding, I stared at my reflection in the mirror longer than I should have. My dress, the same one I'd saved up for myself, no designer labels or lace drama, hung well on me, simple and elegant. My makeup was soft, my hair pinned the way David liked it, with loose curls falling over one shoulder. Everything about how I looked said, "This is your day." But everything I felt inside whispered the opposite. There was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't explain, like I was wearing someone else's skin. I told myself it was nerves. But in the mirror, my smile kept flickering like a bad light bulb. There, but not quite steady. David didn't see it. Or maybe he did, and chose to ignore it. He'd been so supportive these past few weeks, helping with every last-minute task while I tried to convince myself my family's lack of enthusiasm didn't matter. He told me the only thing that mattered was us. And he was right, but I still couldn't silence the part of me that wanted this to feel like more than just a joint effort between two people fighting to make joy out of scraps. I wanted family. I wanted to feel chosen, loved, celebrated. When my parents arrived at the venue, just 20 minutes before the ceremony, my mom was dressed like she was attending a funeral in a gray blouse and flats. My dad didn't shave. They looked bored, like someone had dragged them here as a formality. They handed me a plain envelope. No hug, no warmth. Inside was a generic card with a check for a few $100s, written in shaky pen with a note that read, "Hope this helps with whatever else is left." I didn't even know how to respond. The ceremony itself went by in a blur. David looked at me like I was made of stardust. Our friends cried, cheered, toasted, clapped. It was everything a wedding should be. Except for the undercurrent of tension humming beneath my skin. My mom didn't take a single photo. My dad disappeared right after dinner. Emily didn't show up at all. She'd texted me that morning saying she wasn't feeling well. I didn't believe her. It wasn't until after the reception, when most of the guests had gone and I was finally kicking off my shoes in the bridal suite, that the phone rang. It was Emily. She sounded bright, energetic, not sick, not even pretending to be. "Hey, Mrs. Married," she chirped. "Sorry I missed the whole shindig, but Mom said it was super small anyway, so I didn't think you'd mind." I was too stunned to speak. She kept talking. "Guess what, though? I got the bag. You know, the one I was telling Mom about? They gave me the money like 2 weeks ago, and it just came in yesterday. I'm obsessed." There it was. Confirmation. She knew. She knew the money was meant for the wedding. She knew it had been handed to her behind my back, and she didn't care. "You didn't mind, right?" she added, laughing. "I mean, it's just a bag." Something in me cracked. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said, "You know what? I hope that purse lasts you a lifetime because it cost you a sister." And I hung up. That night, David held me as I sobbed into his chest. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just silent, tired tears. The kind that come from realizing something you always suspected is actually true. The next morning I got up early. I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen of the little Airbnb we'd rented for the weekend and poured myself coffee that had gone cold before I even touched it. I sat by the window and watched the fog roll off the grass like ghosts slipping out before dawn. That was when I heard them talking. My parents. They'd stayed in the suite across the yard. Their voices carried through the open window. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words hit me like glass breaking. "She's always been so dramatic," my mom was saying, "and now she thinks Little Wedding gives her license to act like a martyr." "Well," my dad replied, "at least she didn't embarrass us. Can you imagine if she'd said something about the money?" I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Embarrass you? I wanted to march across the lawn, demand an answer. But I didn't. I sat there, frozen, thinking about how hard I'd worked to make this day special without ever once asking them for more than their presence, how I'd trusted them, given them control over things I cared about. And they'd handed that trust off like it was pocket change. Not even for themselves, but for my sister's designer handbag. When David came in and saw my face, he didn't ask. He just sat beside me and took my hand. Later that day, as we were packing up to leave, my mom approached me with a forced smile. "Everything turned out lovely," she said. "Minimal but tasteful, just like you said you wanted." I looked at her, and really looked, and realized she genuinely believed that I had wanted less, that I had chosen quiet on purpose. Not because I had to, but because it was easier for her to believe that than admit she had made me invisible. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell her about the card, the chair decorations that never arrived, the flowers that didn't get ordered because the budget mysteriously disappeared. I wanted to talk about how Emily had treated my wedding like an inconvenience, how they'd acted like guests at someone else's party. But instead, I just smiled. Tight, small, practiced. "Thank you," I said, "for coming." She beamed, like I'd handed her a trophy. In the weeks that followed, I tried to process everything. The betrayal, the disappointment, the grief, because that's what it was. Not sadness, not anger, grief. For the family I thought I had. For the hope I clung to that someday. Somehow, they'd see me. Choose me. One evening I got a text from my dad. "Let's not dwell on the past. It was just one day. We're still family." I stared at that message for a long time, then I wrote back, "It may have been just one day for you, but it was the only one I ever asked for." I never got a reply. There's this strange silence that happens after a wedding. A kind of emotional whiplash. One minute you're being toasted and photographed and handed slices of cake by people telling you you'll remember this forever. The next, you're back in your kitchen in slippers, sorting through leftover favors and wondering if any of it was real. For most brides, that silence is probably peaceful. But for me, it was heavy. Like walking into an empty room and realizing all the noise that had kept you distracted is finally gone. And now, there's nowhere left to hide. At first, I tried to convince myself that things would get better now, That the wedding, with all its weirdness and passive-aggressive smiles, was just a bump. That maybe now, with the event over, my parents would finally see me, respect me, maybe even appreciate what David and I had built together. But I should have known better. The silence wasn't temporary, it was a pattern of a return to normal. 2 months after our wedding, Emily called to share some news. Her voice was sugary sweet, borderline smug. She didn't even try to act casual. "We're getting married, surprise!" Apparently her boyfriend, or Kyle, had proposed during a weekend getaway in Aspen. I hadn't even known they were still seriously dating. The last time I'd seen him, he'd barely spoken a word to anyone at Thanksgiving, and when he did, it was usually to comment on how dry the turkey was or how small our apartment looked. But he was rich. Like trust fund rich. Private school, family yacht, estate in the Hamptons kind of rich. So of course my parents were over the moon. "He's such a good match for her," my mom said when I called to congratulate them. "And they're thinking of doing something big, like a formal banquet or maybe even a destination wedding." I swallowed the rising lump in my throat. "Wow, that's really nice." "Well," she continued, "a man like that, you have to do it right. His family expects a certain standard. We can't embarrass her." Embarrass her. The same woman who didn't even show up to my wedding. I didn't say anything. Just listened. Let the words sink in like cold water through fabric. They were willing to pull out all the stops now. For Emily. For her wedding. Because the groom was rich. Because she was the one who deserved it. At first I told myself not to care, to let it go. But it got harder every day. Every time we visited my parents, the difference became clearer. When David and I came by, we brought food, gifts, sometimes wine. We helped clean up after dinner, folded laundry when my mom looked tired, made sure to thank them for everything. Even the bare minimum. And when Kyle came over with Emily, he lounged on their couch like he owned the place, shoes still on, eyes glued to his phone. He never helped set the table, never offered to bring anything, never stayed longer than he had to. And yet, they doted on him. My dad would chuckle at his dry jokes like he was the next coming of royalty. My mom fawned over his tie, his watch, his presents. One night after dinner, I asked David in the car, "Is it just me, or do they treat Kyle like a king?" He hesitated before replying. "They definitely treat him differently." That was putting it mildly. The final straw came one afternoon while I was helping my mom look through fabric swatches for Emily's wedding decor. She had already picked a planner, a floral team, a venue that cost more than our car. I'd offered to help out, thinking maybe if I got involved I could reconnect with her, or at least understand where all this excitement was coming from. But as we sat on the living room floor, Emily talking about how she wanted blush peonies flown in from Vancouver, I noticed the look on my mom's face. It was pure admiration. Adoration, even. She wasn't just helping. She was invested. "She deserves something beautiful," my mom said, looking at a swatch of silk with almost teary eyes. "Emily's always have been so special." I couldn't help it. The words came out before I could catch them. "So, she deserves all this, but I didn't?" My mom froze, then blinked, clearly caught off guard. "That's not what I meant." "But it's what you said." Emily looked up from her phone, surprised. "Whoa, chill, it's not a competition." I turned to her, something hard rising in my throat. "No, it's not. But maybe it would have been nice if someone had cared even half this much about my wedding." "You didn't want a big wedding," my mom said, her voice suddenly defensive. "Number than I settled for a small wedding because you told me you couldn't help, because you said money was tight, because I trusted you when you said you'd take care of the decorations, and then you gave it to Emily for a goddamn purse." The room went still. Emily rolled her eyes. "It was a bag, Anna. You're still mad about that." "Yes," I snapped. "Because it wasn't just a bag. It was a message. That I didn't matter. That I wasn't worth the effort." My mom stood up, arms crossed, eyes narrow. "You're being overly sensitive. Emily's always had a harder time. She's had more pressure. She deserves a little extra." "And I didn't?" My voice cracked. "I worked 2 jobs through college. I helped you pay off your car loan. I planned my wedding without asking you for anything. David and I have done nothing but tried to include you. And you treat us like we're some distant cousins you have to tolerate." My dad entered the room at that moment, probably hearing the raised voices. He looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" My mom turned to him. Your daughter thinks we didn't do enough for her wedding. Because you didn't, I said, turning to face him. You handed Emily the royal treatment because her fiancé is rich, because she's your favorite, because I never asked for much, and you took that as a free pass to give me nothing. Emily's always been special, my dad said slowly, like the word held some untouchable weight. So I'm not special? I asked, voice trembling. They didn't answer. Not really. They just looked at me, not with guilt or even understanding, but with discomfort, like I was making a scene, like I was the problem for noticing the unfairness instead of quietly accepting it. That's when it clicked. I had been complicit in my own erasure. I had accepted less because I was taught to believe that less was all I deserved, and suddenly I didn't want to be in that room anymore. Emily's wedding was extravagant in the kind of way that makes you question whether you're still in the same family. There were fresh orchids flown in from Thailand, a 6-tier cake that looked more like a sculpture than dessert, and a private jazz band that played, while servers passed around miniature lobster rolls on gold trays. It was stunning, opulent, loud. I was there. Against every instinct in my body, I showed up. David offered to make an excuse for us, said he could fake a last-minute emergency, but I told him no. We'd go, stay quiet, smile through it. Show up, leave early, take the high road. That was the plan. We brought a gift. A crystal vase I'd found in a little antique shop. Elegant, rare, meaningful. It reminded me of something our grandmother used to have. I wrapped it myself, wrote a note with shaky hands, and handed it to Emily after the ceremony. She looked at it like it was a used Tupperware. Oh, she smirked. A vase. Cute. I tried to brush it off, but later I caught her laughing with our mother. Seriously, that's what she brought? Emily said, her voice loud enough that I knew she wanted me to hear. A vase? It's giving goodwill energy. My mom chuckled softly and said, Well, not everyone can afford real gifts. That's when something in me cracked. I walked over, calm but firm. You know what's funny? I said, looking Emily straight in the eye. When I got married, you didn't even give me a card. Not $1, not a congrats. Nothing. And now you're laughing because I brought something I thought you'd actually appreciate? Emily blinked. My mother stepped in. Anna, this isn't the time. No, you're right. I cut her off. The time would have been my wedding. When you told me there was no money. When you gave my decoration and budget to Emily so she could buy a purse. When you skipped helping me plan and didn't even show up until halfway through the ceremony. My voice didn't rise, but the air around me got colder. I didn't come here to be mocked, and I'm done pretending this is normal. Emily scoffed. Why are you being so dramatic? I turned to David. Let's go. We left before dinner, before the cake, before the fireworks finale. They had teased in the invitation like it was a damn concert, and just like that, I was out. After the wedding, no one called. No one asked why we left. Not even a passive-aggressive text. It was like we'd never been there at all. I thought maybe they were waiting for me to reach out first. But weeks went by, then months. Still nothing. At first I was angry, then I was just hollow. I went through the motions, work, laundry, groceries, sleep, smiled at the neighbors, sent birthday cards to coworkers. I kept it all together on the outside, but inside I was unraveling. I'd wake up at night, heart racing, and wonder what I did today to deserve being cut out so cleanly. I'd scroll through my messages, wondering if I missed a sign, a moment where I could have fixed it, but there was nothing. Just silence. The kind that doesn't just hurt. It echoes. David was my anchor. He never pushed. Never said, I told you so. He just held me. He made breakfast on mornings I couldn't get out of bed. Left notes on my laptop. Took me dancing in the kitchen when the world felt too heavy. You have me, he said once, pressing his forehead against mine, and I'm not going anywhere. Slowly, I started to believe him. We created our own rhythm. Built new traditions, Sunday pancakes, movie nights, random road trips. He made me feel like I mattered. Not because I fought for it, but because I existed. I thought I was healing. Until one day, on a lazy Sunday afternoon, I opened Instagram. I wasn't looking for anything, just scrolling. Distracted. Then the image hit me like a punch to the ribs. My parents, Emily, Kyle, all laughing on a beach somewhere tropical, matching white outfits, cocktail glasses raised. The caption read, Family trip to Santorini. Nothing better than being with the people who truly matter. My chest tightened. No message, no invitation, no mention. Just this perfect, polished photo of a family I used to belong to. I stared at it for a full minute, then closed the app, locked the phone, set it face down on the table, and walked to the bedroom like I was sleepwalking. David followed. He saw it in my face. What happened? They went on vacation, together, all of them. I didn't cry. Not then. I lay down, pulled the covers over my head, and stayed there. For hours. When I finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. I don't think they ever loved me. Not really. David sat beside me. A number they just never knew how to. And somehow that was worse. Time passed. We healed slowly. The wound didn't close completely, but it scarred. I didn't check Instagram anymore. I deleted the group chat, stopped sending Christmas cards. We bought a house, adopted a cat, planted a garden in the backyard where nothing fancy grew, but everything felt alive. We were happy, whole. Enough. Then one Wednesday afternoon my phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Then again. Mom. Dad. Emily. Back to back. I stared at the screen. 7 missed calls in under 10 minutes. Then came the text. Anna, please, something happened. Call us. My hands went cold. I showed the phone to David. He looked at the screen, then at me. Do you think it's real? I don't know. Another text buzzed through. It's your father. We need you. My heart dropped. For a moment, everything stopped. The air and the noise, the thoughts. Just that sentence looping in my mind like a warning. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. But I knew, deep in my gut, that nothing would be the same after this. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen, at the texts, at the missed calls piling up like storm clouds. My mother, my father, even Emily, all suddenly reaching out like I was their last hope. Something happened. It's your father. We need you. Please, please call us. David stood behind me, silent, his hand gently resting on my shoulder. You don't have to, he said, but I knew I would. Kyle had always seemed too polished to be real. The tailored clothes, the quiet smirk, and the way he carried himself like he belonged to a different tax bracket. I used to think it was just confidence, the kind that came from growing up with money. Turns out it wasn't confidence. It was performance. When my parents called me that day, frantic, panicked. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't think I'd find them standing on a sidewalk next to their own furniture. It looked surreal, a snapshot from someone else's disaster. My parents sat silently on overturned suitcases. Emily leaned against a wall, face blotchy, mascara streaked down to her jaw. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. No one said anything for a few seconds. Then Emily broke the silence. He's gone. I raised an eyebrow. Gone where? I don't know, she whispered. He took everything. And she meant it. The money, the townhouse, the accounts, their savings, my father's retirement, all of it. Gone. Kyle had never been who he claimed to be. There was no family trust, no career in finance. The suits were rented. The cars were leased with fraudulent credit lines. Every photo Emily had ever posted was part of a carefully curated illusion, one she helped build, filter by filter, caption by caption. He said he needed capital for a startup, my mom murmured, hands wringing the hem of her sleeve. We signed off on the property so he could get the loan. He said it was secure, my dad added, voice hoarse. He said we were investing in our future. But there was no startup. There was a casino in Nevada, a string of betting apps, and a private poker ring in Miami. Kyle had been in deep long before Emily brought him home. She just never wanted to see it. I thought if I made him look successful, maybe he'd become that person, Emily said. I just wanted to believe he'd change. She had bankrolled his image, convinced our parents to believe in it too. And now, standing in front of a house that no longer belonged to them, all three of them were unraveling. I should have walked away then. But I didn't. Instead, I asked, Where are you staying tonight? They exchanged glances. My mother shook her head. We don't know. I took a deep breath, nodded slowly, and made a few calls. After some digging, I found a short-term rental, a modest 2-bedroom apartment 15 minutes away. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean, safe, furnished. A start. I paid the deposit, gave the landlord their names, offered to help them move what little they had left. No one said thank you. The next day, I drove them to the new place. Emily sat in the back, arms crossed, still sniffling. My parents rode up front, silent. When we arrived, my mother looked around and frowned. There's no elevator? It's only one flight, I said, holding the keys. The hallway smells weird, she added, waving her hand. Emily peeked into the kitchen and sighed. These countertops are laminate, and the fridge is tiny. I stood still for a beat. It's temporary, I said. You just lost your home. I figured survival was the priority. My father muttered under his breath. Guess we know what side she's always been on. I turned. What did you say? He didn't meet my eyes. Emily spoke instead. You've always looked down on us. You're just happy to be right. That stopped me cold. Right? I repeated. You think I'm happy about this? That watching our family collapse in on itself is some kind of revenge fantasy? Silence. I could have walked away, but I didn't. I found you a place. I covered the first month. I'm here, not because I want to be, but because I hoped for once you'd let me in without pushing me out. My voice cracked, but I didn't cry. My mom shifted uncomfortably. If you'd just supported us a little earlier, maybe things wouldn't have gotten this far. I stared at her in disbelief. Are you serious? I asked you to help me plan a wedding, and you gave my budget to Emily. I invited you into my life, and you laughed behind my back. You told me not to expect anything, and now you're angry I didn't give you more? Emily threw her hands up. You never understood how much pressure I was under. I snapped. You lied. You built a fantasy and dragged everyone into it. And when it fell apart, you called me. Not because you loved me, but because I was the last number on your list. No one spoke. Just the soft hum of the fridge in the background. I looked at them one last time, and pale, bitter, still looking for someone else to blame. And in that moment, I made my choice. I set the keys on the counter. You've got a roof, a bed, and time to think. I turned to leave. I'm done. I didn't answer their texts after that. For weeks, my mother sent half-hearted updates, photos of the apartment, complaints about the neighbors. Emily forwarded job listings that were clearly meant for me, not her. My dad sent 2 messages, both with links to money transfer apps. I didn't reply. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I cared enough to finally stop. David was the only one who truly understood. He didn't ask if I felt guilty. He didn't try to reason with me. He just hugged me tighter at night and said, sometimes letting go is the only thing left to do. I had given them chances. Years of them. Opportunities to include me, hear me, respect me. And when they needed help, I showed up. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I still hoped they might finally see me. They didn't. They saw a wallet, a spare option, a fallback, and I wasn't that anymore. I blocked their numbers after the 5th guilt trip, after Emily said, I don't know why you're so cold lately. As if my entire childhood had been an overreaction. I deleted the old photos, packed away the memories, and drew a new boundary with a heavy, permanent pen. And life kept moving. David and I traveled. We renovated our home. We hosted dinner parties filled with laughter instead of tension. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, built a community from the ground up. Then one spring morning, it happened. 2 pink lines on a test strip. David found me crying on the bathroom floor, but not in sadness, in awe. We were going to be parents. It was the kind of joy I didn't know my heart could hold. Soft, slow, steady. A joy not built on conditions, not dependent on someone else's approval. Just real, raw happiness. I didn't tell my parents. Not when I hit the 2nd trimester. Not when we found out it was a girl. Not when we built the nursery or chose the name. I didn't want them to ruin it. This joy was sacred. Ours. And when she arrived, all squirmy and red-faced and loud, I knew without a shred of doubt that I'd never allow anyone to make her feel the way I had. She would never question her place in my heart, never have to earn love that should have been freely given. We named her Mira. It means wonder, because she was. And in the soft, sleep-deprived months that followed, I discovered something else. I didn't just love her. I loved us, our little family, the way David looked at her, the way he looked at me, like I was finally whole. The news of what happened to my family came later, through a distant cousin, one I hadn't spoken to in years. It started with the apartment. They stopped paying rent. Emily couldn't hold down a job. She said she was too good for entry-level work. Said no one appreciated her creativity. My parents enabled her. Again. Spent what little they had left covering her Uber rides, her nail appointments, her excuses. Eventually the money ran out. They got evicted again. No one else in the family would take them in. Word had gotten out about Kyle, the lies, the loan fraud, the wedding, the entitlement. Everyone had a story. Unpaid debts, burned bridges, manipulations. Even the relatives who used to side with my mom quietly stepped back. The last I heard, they were living with an old family friend, someone who pitied them more than they loved them. My mom still posted once in a while. Generic quotes about forgiveness and family sticking together like she hadn't spent decades tearing hers apart. She never mentioned me. And I was okay with that. I had nothing left to prove. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was Mira's mom, David's wife. A woman with peace in her heart and fire in her spine. We sent out Christmas cards that year. Our first is 3. The card had a photo of Mira grinning in a little red dress, her cheeks like snow globes. Beneath it the message read, "Home is the family you build, not the one that broke you." We mailed it to everyone, except them. Sometimes the people who raised you are the first to teach you what love isn't. You can spend years begging for scraps of affection, lowering yourself to fit inside their version of worthy, and they still won't see you. But one day, you will. You'll see your own worth, your softness, your strength. You'll understand that family isn't built from blood. It's built from choice, respect, and unconditional love. And when that moment comes, you'll stop chasing ghosts. You'll plant your roots in new soil, grow something better, something that's finally yours. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you, just know that wasn't selfish. That was survival. And you deserve every bit of joy on the other side.